Deep Cinema. We're doing the follow-up to, we're doing a review of the movie The Lorax. We mentioned before that we expected to see good animation, some pretty good voice acting.
We got that.
We definitely got that. But I was wondering in particular whether the philosophy of the movie was going to bother me enough that it became uncomfortable. Just too hard to watch. And it was.
Yeah.
I would have to rate this movie as a... I know this is harsh, but I wouldn't recommend spending the money to go see it.
No, I'm thankful we went to a matinee.
Yeah, we did. The animation was excellent. The animation really was good.
Visually very pretty.
And I think the voice acting, particularly of Danny DeVito, he did an excellent job.
Yeah.
But
I agree.
But there were so many things about that movie that bothered me. And I think really we ought to talk about at least a couple of them.
Yeah, well, where do you want to start?
Yeah, where do we start? The first thing that bothered me so much was let's just start with the fact that the movie did not attempt to touch on truth as it related to the environment. Truth as it related to capitalism. Truth as it related to its own self-imposed tension between money and the world.
This movie assumed all the Hollywood cliches.
It was extremely cliche.
The environment is God. Businesses are evil. What else do we do? Parents are stupid.
Parents are stupid.
Grandparents are smart.
Grandparents are kind of smart because they're fun.
They're fun and they're so unrealistic though in Hollywood.
That's a good
This is becoming a cliche too of the grandma who does obviously non-grandma things, and that makes it so funny because oh look, the grandma's on a snowboard. You know, that's what cool hip teenagers do. It's so funny to see a grandma on a snowboard.
Now that's a really good point. Making the grandma cool because she's better at being a teenager than the teenagers.
Exactly.
That was a tragedy. I mean, that was a very disappointing thing to see for me. Not because she's old and wise, but because she's better at being a teenager than the teenagers are.
Redeeming thing, she was old and wise.
She was older and wiser. She
played the appropriate role of mentor.
Yes. But it was a shame to see his mother so self-consciously portrayed as being stupid.
Yeah, and it wasn't really redeemed at the end, sort of, but not really.
No.
At the end when she helped them.
Yes.
Spoilers, by the way. This is kind of how we roll, right?
Yeah, you know, if you're going to watch our reviews, you're going to get spoilers. But that's... one of the things that troubled me the most about the movie was the insistence that the way to tell who the good guy and the bad guy is by the clothes they wear, by the music that plays, by the way they dance. This movie was extraordinarily well done in the fact that it pulled out every cliche in the book, every visual, audio tactic to help you know who was the good guy and the bad guy.
Exactly.
It was definitely a kid's movie in that they tried to hold your hand every step of the way to make sure you didn't make any mistakes. How do you know who's the bad guy? Well, the bad guy has henchmen. The henchmen have black coats. The henchmen have sunglasses. The henchmen, they shoulder people around. They move in, ka-chunk, like a door. They move apart and let you through. It was so cliched, but there were no concepts of truth. Jesus says, you shall know them by their fruits, not by the coat they wear.
Right.
And yet, that's what this movie in particular, as an example of Hollywood's way to train children.
And we know that it worked.
And we know that it worked because we could hear the kids in the theater cheering for the good guy and booing for the bad guy. It wasn't quite that much, but I could hear the tension building, and I was expecting a whole bunch of children to start clapping near the end. And there was a bunch of kids, you know, cheering, and they were little kids. They were so easily programmed. But it's not so much that they're being programmed to believe that this particular person is evil. They're being programmed to believe that the way you find evil is by looking for images and not looking for content. That's one of the things that bothered me so much about the Lorax, is that it specifically tried hard to say, you want to know who's good and bad? Listen to the music. The whole musical number, how bad can I be? How bad can this be?
Yeah.
Was
there was no meat in it whatsoever. There was no addressing of what the actual issues are. He's just bad. Why?
He's bad because as he's singing, we see all these visual images of stuff that we are supposed to know is bad.
Yeah, we're supposed to know that cutting down any trees is bad. We're supposed to know that wanting to make money is bad.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to make money and you want to cut down trees, one of the scenes that disappointed me so much so early in the movie was the burial scene of the tree stump.
Right.
Oh, that was so tear-jerky. Oh.
It was so obvious. That was the point at which I'm like, okay, this movie is about worshiping the earth.
Yeah.
They all started holding hands. They're basically about to start praying.
It was a burial ceremony for the tree stump.
Right.
That's not the way God wants us to treat trees.
No.
So that was the one thing that really bugged me. The emphasis on images and not content. The emphasis on images and not truth. Just, you're supposed to feel bad about a person, and then you decide who you side with by who makes you feel like they're good and bad. It's very frustrating.
Yeah. The Lorax says to the Onceler, which way does a tree fall? The Onceler says, down. And Danny DeVito says, no, a tree falls the way it leans. Be careful which way you're leaning. What way was he leaning at that point? At that point, he had made the promise not to chop down a tree, and he hadn't chopped down any more trees since then. So as far as the Lorax knew, he's still holding his promises. So it's not you're leaning towards becoming a person who breaks their word. It's just you're leaning towards badness. And all we have is you're leaning towards trying to make money. That's bad, I guess. You know, very Marxist, very anti-business, obviously, both in the Onceler and in O'Hare.
Yeah, that's another thing that we ought to point out is the insistent, the incessant, the so overplayed anti-business nature of the film.
Yeah.
I mean, we're introduced to O'Hare looking like a water delivery guy. Now,
right.
I have a friend who's a water delivery guy, and people are thankful for his services.
Right.
Because he helps them drink water they wouldn't otherwise drink.
And water, free, clear water, used to be a free natural resource, and it's just not that common anymore.
That's true. It's difficult to find, but that's not the fault of the people who bring water to other people.
Exactly. And we see the same thing with air in this case. It gets so polluted that he has to sell people air. But the moment of the genesis of his business.
Yeah, that was an interesting scene. Later in the movie, we see him come up with the idea for O'Hare Air because he's watching his coworker cough at the smog. Well, someone who comes up with a product to help his friend live a happier, healthier life should not be made to be evil. Yes, later in his life, he's like, oh, I don't want any trees because trees make clean air and then I couldn't sell as much. Yeah, that is evil, but the movie confused his character by making him start off as somebody who is trying to help the world.
Yeah, he's just trying to help the world.
But the movie even confused that scene because they made him look like this greedy guy. He saw his friend coughing.
Oh, I'm gonna help people.
It was confusing.
Yeah.
It was lying about the
And that's what I don't think the filmmakers were self-conscious about all the cliches that they were bringing forth. I think they themselves were people who had imbibed those things, and they know that's just how you make a movie. You know, James Cameron has taught them, you know, this is what Hollywood is about, this is what makes a good movie, you know.
So if you want to make a good movie, just use a bunch of cliches. So here's the box of cliches. What point are you trying to make? Well, you rummage through the box until you find all the cliches.
And then you bring together all these wonderful artisans who can make amazing, beautiful pictures, and team them up with cliches.
Yeah. Which takes great
that sums up Hollywood right there. Mostly. A bunch of amazing, beautiful images and a big box of cliches. You know?
That's a good point. That's a good point, Spencer. And then when you put all those cliches to music, it gets really hard to sit through. I'm sorry.
What happened to the Rodgers and Hammersteins of the world? You know? There's a difference between the hills are alive with the sound of music, but in this it would be just like hey, I'm running on a hill and singing and waving my arms like this, because all they did was sing about what they were doing. You know, this is bad, this is good, this is how you're supposed to feel right now, and there's no meat. This is not good. This is a good example of art declining in our culture.
And not only that, movies like this are a good example of why we have people that grow up and can't think.
Right.
Because they were taught not to think.
They were taught when they were little kids in the theater clapping to a bunch of meaningless cliches.
Yeah. So, anyhow, if you take your kids to see the movie, be forewarned that there's a lot of bad stuff. There's a lot of bad philosophy. Fun, great animation, great to see, but, not a very good movie.
Yeah, you need to sit down and have like a good conversation with them after you're done.
Yeah.
If you go and watch it and dissect this thing and question everything those characters did, because there's a lot of lies.
There's a lot of lies. So, the Lorax might be worth seeing, but if you're on a tight budget, I wouldn't spend the money.
Yeah.